Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brandt. On this week's show, we're going to pick UFC 191 live from Las Vegas on pay-per-view this Saturday. And, of course, as our title mentioned, does Fedor Emelianenko sign with the UFC, and will they announce it this weekend at UFC 191? Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. He is Billy Brandt, right there. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrandt21. How's it going today, Billy?
Good. I'm really liking this new live setup. It's a cool situation, so it should be fun.
Yeah, this is something we're trying. We were going to do it a certain way, but I made a little mishap and ordered the wrong part to do it. So we're still in the same room. We're still able to accomplish this week's show, but not as crystal clear as I originally planned. But I think that's all right. We're going to get the point across to everyone at home watching on YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever way you like listening to Beyond the Cage. So let's start first with that big headline. We already titled it the show, Will Fedor Emelianenko sign with the UFC? It's been rumored here for weeks. A lot of rumor mills and stuff are putting it out there that he has signed. They just haven't announced it. They're maybe waiting for UFC 191, or of course they're doing one of those another big press conference event. This one is titled Go Big. Last year it was Time Is Now, which we know is probably going to announce the schedule for 2016. So either way, whether they announce it this weekend or at that Go Big event, I wouldn't be surprised if an announcement like that happens. The thing is, if they do sign Fedor, question would be, how quickly will his first fight be, and who would his first opponent be? Some people in the rumor sphere are already putting that the winner of Frank Mir and Andrei Arlovski this weekend will fight Fedor. I, however, and we'll get Billy's take here in just a second, do not think that's a good idea. Because to me, well, at least for Andrei Arlovski, if he beats Frank Mir, now puts himself on a 6-fight overall winning streak, 4-0 in the UFC since returning to the promotion, deserves a shot at the UFC title. And I think it's a great story, regardless whether it's Fabricio Verdum or Cain Velasquez that comes out of that rematch. Obviously better if it's Verdum because he already beat Verdum many, many years ago. So that would be a great rematch and great way to build that fight. But looking at Fedor just on its own, Billy, do you think that they're going to announce it at one of these two big events? And two, do you like the rumor of the Mir Arlovski winner getting Fedor? And three, if you don't, who would you like to see Fedor face in his first fight in the UFC?
Yeah, if they're not going to announce it at one of these two events, I mean, when are you going to? So I'm assuming the time is now. You don't want to waste too much time with Fedor. The thing is, as far as Mir Arlovski, I really don't like that matchup right now. I think Arlovski or Mir, whoever wins that fight, deserves so much more. I mean, when Arlovski knocks out the number 3 guy in the world in Travis Brown, and then you take Fedor coming back, which is cool and big, but he definitely needs to be up in that title shot. Maybe for Frank Mir, I can understand. That's probably a fight people want to see for a long time when Frank Mir was the champ and Fedor could never get in. And I don't know if Mir as much is in that run. But, I mean, we all want to see the Crow Cop fight, and I think that fight needs to happen. We'll see what happens with his next fight. And I'm not even too sure. I mean, I know it's basically said the UFC, but all really happened was Scott Coker was like, no, it's not Bellator, and then people kind of jumped on. So it could still, he has his own promotion. We never know. I'm trying not to get too caught up in it yet, but I wouldn't want to see Arlovski or Mir. I'd really like Crow Cop.
Now, if Frank Mir loses, or Andrei Arlovski loses, and the loser faces Fedor, that's fine, because they're coming off a loss. It's not that big a deal. In fact, I think that makes for a better matchup. I don't think Emelianenko has to face someone coming off on a win. I don't think that matters. But what does matter to me is where he's placed on the card. I don't think he's a pay-per-view headline guy when it's not the title. I mean, this is a guy coming 3 years out of retirement. He's 6-6, or I'm sorry, 3-3 in his last 6 fights. This is not a guy who's been sitting on the world fire as of late. We all know how great his career has been. He's one of the all-time greats of the sport, maybe the greatest, depending on who you believe. He's deserving. I know the UFC's broken up different wings of the Hall of Fame now. He's deserving of a spot in there, even if he never stepped foot in the octagon. I mean, they own the rights to Pride, so by ipso facto, they can kind of put him in however they want. But he's a guy that deserves to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. So by that token, he doesn't need to fight. He's fighting because he feels good if he wants to do it, at least give it one more try at a high level of competition. We'll see how it goes. But I'm with you. I would really like Mirko Krokop to get dropped off that Korea card. no offense to Anthony Hamilton, but he's not Fedor Emelianenko, probably never will be.
Yeah.
Good young heavyweight. He is an exciting guy, but would love to see Crow Cop versus Fedor. Let's put that UFC 195, New Year's Eve weekend, Las Vegas. Set that as possibly the co-main event or like the next big fight I believe, I know it's rumored, but I think Cain Velasquez Verdum 2 will be at 195. I got to believe that's the main event now that Ronda's off and moving to Australia at 193. And I think they're waiting to get a definite okay on Gadella and Jacek to have that be the co-main event. And I think that's a great co-main event because a lot of people, I think, will tune in for Velasquez and Verdum. You add in Fedor versus, well, again, hopefully Crow Cop, but anybody. That's the 3 big fights for, the New Year's Eve weekend card. That's a big fight. That's going to help sell, and the pressure's off of Fedor to perform. It's going to draw some people in, but he's not expected to draw it off himself. The only other thing that maybe, and obviously they already got a pretty good Fox show booked with a good main event and co-main event. I'm not sure when the next Fox show will be. If they do one January, April, I'm not sure how their schedule will go, but he would also be perfect for a main event of a Fox show. But I think they're going to try to put him this year, 2015, to start.
If they do, yeah, like you said, like if Crow Cop comes off the Anthony Hamilton fight, I mean, what's the most it does for him if he wins to build it rather than if he loses? Like, it's kind of a pointless fight to me. We all know who Crow Cop is, knows. So if Hamilton comes up off this big win, I mean, it's a big win for him, but it's not going to shoot him into whatever. Crow Cop has a lot of buzz right now. Fedor's coming back. That's the fight everyone wants to see. He's got to make it happen.
Also, this is unrelated, but for 195, I'm hoping to see Shogun Rampage 2.
Yeah, that
unrelated, but that's what I would like to see. So we'll find out this weekend if they announce it. To be honest, I'd like it to be at the Go Big press conference because, that's the whole point of a press conference is to announce something worthwhile. Them announcing their 50 dates in 2016 with no certain location isn't that big a deal because they did it last year. We kind of know what to expect. So to me, this would add some sizzle to it. This would actually make it an event. Announcing it during the pay-per-view, people are already, I guess, probably going to tune into a pay-per-view. Are that many more people going to tune in for the potential of them saying we signed Fedor?
Yeah,
no one's paying $60 for that.
No.
So I would do it at the press conference.
Yeah, I mean, you got to announce something there. That's true. And unless they have something else crazy up their sleeve, which I don't know what they could have booked, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that'll come out of it.
All right, let's get to some more headlines here. Let's start with the guy that Fedor Emelianenko has fought. In fact, one of the best fights in Pride. And we're talking about Big Nog. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira has officially announced from the UFC and from the sport of MMA. And he has accepted the role as an ambassador for the UFC for Brazil as his new title, similar to what Matt Hughes and Chuck Liddell are currently doing with the UFC, but him doing it specifically for the fighters down in Brazil. And I kind of figured this was going to happen. He was going to get some type of role, and I think we suggested this right after his loss to Stefan Struve. So it's good to see. Oh, I forgot Forrest Griffin was also in a very similar role as well. So it's good to keep him around. He's a great guy to have, and I wouldn't be surprised for UFC 200 and that Fan Expo weekend and Hall of Fame that this man here, Mr. Big Nog, gets put in the Hall of Fame as well.
Yeah, he definitely deserves it. I mean, when you think of like great heavyweights, no one's gonna not talk about Nog. I mean, he's been through so many classic wars and sort of built that huge division over there, and it's just good for him. I'm glad he's finally calling it because he's had a good retire, but you hate to see when they keep going out there and putting out some of those performances. So great career for him. Yeah, instant Hall of Famer.
38 years old, I believe. 46 professional fights. At one time was the Pride heavyweight champion and was the first former Pride champion to capture any sort of UFC gold, that being the UFC interim heavyweight championship. So he is technically the only fighter to have both belts. So that's a pretty big deal. So that's one reason, obviously, he should automatically go in the Hall of Fame. And I think the greatest thing about his career was he was one of the few guys that would literally just get the tar beat out of him and somehow pull out a submission. During his heyday, I would say maybe 2002 to 2008, kind of that 6-year span I would consider his prime, the punishment this guy took and then pulling out a submission, I don't know if that can ever be recaptured. I mean, it's one thing to knock guys out flashy like Anderson Silva, or just be technically sound like a Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, or just be a superior athlete like John Jones. But the ability to get beat up for 15 minutes and have your face look like a bloody pulp, and then have the wherewithal to catch guys in technical arm bars and triangle chokes and anaconda chokes and stuff like that is just incredible. And I don't know if anyone will be able to replicate the style of fighting, if you want to call it a style, that Big Dog had.
It's absolutely amazing too, because just like you're saying, I mean, people give all the credit when guys are getting rocked or they're getting hit and they come and they land, but like everyone has puncher's chance. They're still swinging, they can knock you out. To be able to go through all that and then pull off a submission is so much more impressive. I mean, how he did it and multiple times is so impressive. But yeah, it's just instant Hall of Famer. Nog is one of the best ever.
All right, let's continue on with some UFC news, a couple of fight announcements. Now, this one may seem minor, but we got to talk about our hometown guy here, Motown Phenom, Kevin Lee. We had him on the show before his last fight, and he was able to dispatch James Muntasiri very quickly. Very impressive performance. And with that, now moving 4-1 in the UFC, 4-fight winning streak. You and I, and much to Kevin Lee's thought, he was going to get a top 15 guy. He was looking for somebody such as a Jim Miller, but that fight wasn't happening, and he was sure why, it wasn't happening. The UFC offered him Leonardo Santos, who's currently 3-0 with a draw in the UFC, 35 years old. Sure, a solid guy, but Lee felt that he was, at this point now, ready to take on maybe someone a little higher regarded than Santos. I don't blame him, but Kevin Lee decided, well, if that's all they're going to throw at me, if they're not throwing me top 15 guys, I got to take what I can get. So he ended up taking the fight against Santos. It will appear at UFC 184, right where he's training and living now in Las Vegas. So I think that was part of the appeal, too. He didn't have to leave anywhere. But for Kevin Lee, I think it's not only the fact he's now in a 4-fight winning streak. When you beat a guy like Muntasiri, who we thought was a pretty solid guy, Blackhouse, Machida, and now Brahma, Alan Joe Boy, all the Anderson Silva, all those guys run out of Blackhouse, Ale. That's a solid guy. That's a guy who was ready to go, and he was able to dispatch him in the first round via submission. I think it is time for Lee to get a step up. Why guys were not taking it, why they weren't offering to him, I don't know. It's kind of weird when they're like, people aren't taking these fights. Saying Kevin Lee's an unknown guy. Like, he may be an unknown guy, but he's good. Watch his 4 victories here in the UFC. This kid's talented, and he's big. I mean, when we were talking to Kevin Lee, he told me when he was walking around, I was like, yeah, what's your weight? It was a month before the fight. He's like, yeah, I'm a little big. I'm at 187. This is a big dude, and he's been able to get down and have good conditioning. I mean, that fight he had in Colorado, people thought, oh, well, he's cutting too much weight. He had great conditioning for that fight at high elevation. This kid's ready to go, and no offense to Leonardo Santos, but that would have been a good fight, him against Jim Miller or someone around that range.
Yeah, I would have loved to see Miller, someone like a little bigger in name-wise, but it's still a good fight for him. And you kind of can't say too much. And there's people like Neil Magny that took like his 7th fight to get a top 15 guy even, So some people, that's just how they do it. And I just hope he can stay consistent like that and keep going. He has all the potential in the world and hopefully bring a card to Detroit.
Hopefully, and I think you got Miles Jury, Darren Kirkshank, Brandon Marcos. I know technically from Windsor, but training here in Detroit with Michigan top team. I think maybe Tony Ferguson has ties to the state of Michigan. Rashad Evans and Green Maynard both went to Michigan State. UFC Hall of Famer Dan Severin's from Michigan, if they can somehow played him in a role at Q&A or something. They got people they can bring in for this event. When the UFC went to Detroit, I covered that event, and I remember going to the press conference and Dana White saying, I don't know why people are knocking Detroit. He's like, this was a happening place. We had a good crowd, and we'll definitely be back. Well, that was going on almost 5 years ago. Yeah. So, and we have the venues. I don't know. Not only is the Palace old, but a great arena. The Palace is still, to me, one of the best arenas in the NBA. So that's a great place if they want to come back to the Palace. I know the Joe's old, but it has history. It's downtown. They want to wait for the brand new arenas coming. That's the perfect spot to have it. I know they haven't done too many huge stadium shows, but they already did WrestleMania 23 at Ford Field. They did over 80,000 people there. Great facility. Great for MMA. They've done so many other events. They've done the Final Four. They've done the Frozen Four. Yeah. I mean, that's a great multi-use facility, and they have that to their disposal as well.
Yeah, I don't get enough how it's been, 5 years for real? It's been that long. I mean,
it's going on it, yeah.
It's ridiculous. We need something down here.
And also, I know they talked about that fight in Windsor. I would almost consider that kind of the Detroit event, having it at Casino. Well,
Right.
it's now Caesars Windsor, but Casino Windsor is what it used to be called. That seats close to 10,000 people. They're a
Yeah.
nice arena there. So that obviously never materialized. That was supposed to happen in March. So to get that on the books, that'd be nice. But all right, enough about local stuff here. So let's switch on. Another big fight, another interview guest we had on, the karate hottie Michelle Watterson. She has decided to take a fight, despite having that finger injury, but it's not going to keep her out too long. And as we discussed when we talked to her, she will be now taking on top 10 ranked strawweight Tisha Torres. Well, I don't know how I mispronounced her name. The Tiny Tornado. And this should be a very excellent fight. You can make a case the winner of this fight gets a shot at the strawweight title. You add in Watterson's credentials as the former Invicta champion. Torres is already 2-0 in the UFC, undefeated in her career. Either or gets a win, very likely could get a shot at the title. Officially to take place also at UFC 194, of course, main evented by Conor McGregor against Jose Aldo, as well as Chris Weidman and Bracco for the middleweight title. We just talked about Kevin Lee's going to be on the card. So very excited for UFC 194 in Vegas. And, boy, this is a great matchup for the strawweight division. And I know Valerie Letourneau's out there. She's out there. But I think Letourneau's going to face the winner of this weekend's strawweight fight in Chambers and Paige Van Zandt. So that would set up kind of the next contender, whereas I think this will be the official number one contender.
Yeah, I think when you see Paige says she wants to wait till she's ready and all this other stuff, and then the Goodella fight's booked, this is the next fight out there. I think it's the true contender fight, and then maybe after that you'll see the winner of Paige Letourneau going to fight one more time, probably even for at least Paige. I don't think she's going to be ready for a while, and I say that because I just think they're going to try and push her into it the most. But this is probably the fight that deserves it, and it will be a really good and close matchup. So we'll see how that whole division pans out. I love it right now because I say it every week, but every week there's a new girl in that's like one fight away, so we never know.
All right, let's continue on with the UFC news. The cast for the Ultimate Fighter 22, McGregor versus Faber, better known as the UFC versus Europe. Kind of a Ryder Cup. If people know golf, it's USA versus Europe, so that's kind of cool. It will start with 32 contestants, 16 from Europe, 16 from America. Whittle it down to 8 against 8, as it usually is on the format. Now, most of the European guys, I don't know, well, with good names, but we got a good mix of guys all throughout Europe. Quite a few from Germany, England, France, a couple from Poland, Scotland, Sweden, the Netherlands, Spain, and only one guy from Ireland. So that surprised me a little bit there. One guy they list is Holland, but isn't Holland the Netherlands? I didn't know there was a difference between the two. But it looks as though Germany has the most guys coming from this year. But like I said, overall, a good mix of people. I don't know any of those guys.
I do think, I want to say Artem Lobov, I'm pretty sure is Conor McGregor's main sparring partner. So I think he'll be a big name, at least looking into it.
I had to figure one of his guys were probably going to get it.
Yeah,
I think he probably had like a guaranteed pick. They're like, Connor, who's one guy you would say deserves a shot? And he probably picked this guy.
I remember watching the countdown and stuff. That's his main sparring partner that he goes with. So he should be interesting to look out for.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if it's because of a lot of fights or tough competition, or maybe it's just not that good. 11-10 with a draw, but only 28 years old, so still pretty young in the sport. Now, looking at Team USA, overall, again, I don't know a lot of the names, but two popped up that I actually have seen before. Tim Welsh is a guy that actually fought on Bellator's Fight Master and fought in Bellator a couple times. So Tim Welsh we'll see. And Tom Galicolo, we actually interviewed here on Beyond the Cage. He was the MFC, the Maximum Fighting Champion, lightweight champion. He actually trains with Sam Alvey and Dan Henderson, those guys at Team Quest out in Temecula, California. So just kind of looking at that and his pedigree, well, I don't know if he's a shoo-in to make the final 16 casts, but I got to say Tom Galicchio, to me, would probably be an early favorite just because his training partners, and he's fought some pretty high-level competition fighting with the MFC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the two names an example, but this season I'm really excited for. I've kind of fell off the whole Ultimate Fighter thing. I think it's ran its course, but I mean, I love Conor just as much as any fan. So you put him on there with Faber, it's going to be a fun season and should be interesting to watch. And it looks like there's a lot of good talent. They got a new little dynamic there at USA, Europe. So this one will be fun to watch. I'm actually excited. I'll tune into this one a little more.
The 22nd season of The Ultimate Fighter will premiere on Fox Sports 1 on September 9th with a 2-hour premiere. Let's get to the last headline here. The first thing that's not UFC, well, kind of UFC, as former UFC top contender, won the American Gangster, Chael P. Sonnen, out of Westland, Oregon, has now signed a deal not only to just still be the ESPN MMA analyst, but he will also be the analyst / color commentary guy for World Series of Fighting, replacing Bas Rutten, who normally did them. And also we saw Renzo Gracie do a couple events as well. So now be Chael Sonnen joining Todd Harris, and that will be for World Series of Fighting 23, which will take place this month on the NBC Sports Network. Rematch Justin Gaethje against Luis Palomino against their action-packed first fight earlier this year. We get to see a rematch. That's going to be in Phoenix, Arizona. Always excited to see Justin Gaethje fight, and I think this is awesome. Don't get me wrong, I love Bas Rutten. I hate that. I wish it would be Bas and Chael, to be quite honest. But it will be interesting to see Chael actually do a broadcast, something I don't believe he's ever done before, at least to my knowledge. So I'm actually looking forward to the American Gangster with Todd Harris.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I love Chael Sonnen, but kind of like you said, it's bittersweet because you love Bas just as much. He's one of the best, but it looks like it was just because he's busy reading down this article. He has to do something with Access TV, so at least it's not something he got fully replaced. I really like Chael, but honestly, I don't know how he's going to do in a full commentary spot. We'll have to see where it goes.
I wonder if they'll have to taper him down. I mean, this is
I
know it's technically cable, but it's still NBC Sports, so he may have to kind of clean up maybe a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's done good on ESPN, and then when he was on Fox Sports, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But you never know when you're getting hyped in the fights, the heat of the moment. So
yeah, he can do a lot of ridiculous things. So I just hope Chael keeps it cool and he's the original gangster he is.
all right, let's get to this weekend's card, UFC 191. Huge fight. September 5th here in Las Vegas. Before we get to the main card and give our picks, pretty good undercard for UFC 194. Of course, most of it will be shown on Fox Sports 1. Look at this. We got Joe Riggs. He's making his return to the middleweight division. He is taking on Ron Stallings. Of course, he was supposed to fight at the Nashville card, had to delay his fight a little bit, about a month. So he's going to take on Ron Stallings, who gets a full camp to get in for a fight instead of 3 days to fight Uriah Hall.
Good for Ron Stallings because that dude stepped up when no one would, and he brought a fight. I mean, I think he got a cut, so it stopped it. But he definitely brought a fight. And then after that, I think he took one more fight that I really liked. I forget who he fought, but good for Ron Stallings. He will take it, and he'll show up every time. I mean, no one wants to fight Uriah Hall on that notice, and he came.
Also, young prospect here at 145, Clay Collard. This kid is very good. He's going to take on Thiago Silva in one of the prelims fight. Also, I thought it was going to be a pretty big fight here, as we're going to have Liz Carmouche against Raquel Pennington. Carmouche had to drop out, but we still get another top women's bantamweight fighter in Jessica Andrade as she takes on Raquel Pennington.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of looking at the surprise right now because I didn't look too much into this undercard at how good this was. Like, both these fights are easily main card fights too, and yeah, it's a big fight for both them. Raquel Pennington's kind of had a rough time since she came in the UFC, but I still think she has a lot of potential there.
Very talented, of course. I thought she had beat Holly Holm in Holm's first fight, so we know she has incredible stand-up. The difference we'll see if Andrade can get this to the ground. I would say that's where she would advantage. But Pennington, so far in the UFC, I don't think she's been taken down. I'm trying to think. Well, I think that Bulldog choke, she was trying to get taken down by Ashley Evans Smith before she caught that. So, she's a tough cookie to get on the ground. And standing up, she's proved that she has a very solid stand-up and hits pretty hard.
That's what I was saying. She's kind of had a tough go, more so for the Holly Holm fight. I do think she probably took that fight, and Holly Holm is known just striking, so it's really impressive on her, and I look forward to that fight.
All right, this fight right here I'm really excited for. I think this is I'm going to go on a limb. I think this is my favorite fight here on the undercard, and that's saying something considering the next one I would just want to talk about in a minute. Francisco Rivera, this guy's been on a roll since losing to Uriah Faber. I mean, his last fight just blitzkrieging Bruce Leroy. Now takes on John Lineker, who the UFC's forcing to go up to bantamweight after missing weight like 5 times in the flyweight division. I just think that this is the perfect learning experience for Lineker to find out if he should be at flyweight or bantamweight. Because Francisco Rivera is a guy, he doesn't mess around. He's coming right at you and he's throwing bombs. He may lose the fight, but you're going to feel it the next day if you win. This is a guy that does not go down easily, and I think he is a guy that can rise into a top contender in the bantamweight division because not too many guys. It's one thing to be aggressive, but you follow up with his power and his toughness, and I think he actually does have a good, well-rounded game. He just likes to go in there and throw and get in your face early. And I think Lineker may be in for a rude awakening, not only moving up in weight, but taking on a guy as good as Francisco Rivera.
Yeah, that Faber fight, I mean, he got really unlucky with the eye poke, and that's how it kind of ended, too. I think even if that fight hadn't gone that way, we might have been seeing him in a lot bigger place right now. I mean, it went over, not saying he would have won that fight, but it definitely changed the fact of that fight, so I don't really put that too much against him. And, yeah, I'm really excited for this. Like you said, it can't not be fireworks. They're both going to swing in the middle of the cage, and they could go all day, so I expect to see a war there the whole 3 rounds.
And what ends up being the main event of the undercard, Paul Felder against former Ultimate Fighting winner Ross Pearson. Pearson coming off a very disappointing performance in his last fight against Evan Dunham in Scotland. Paul Felder, short notice, best fight he's ever had, or best fighter he's ever had to face, and Edson Barboza now takes on Ross Pearson. Should be in a very exciting one. I think Paul Felder, despite losing to Barboza, proved a lot and proved that he can hang in there with a top 10 elite level fighter like Edson Barboza on short notice. Now a full camp, taking on Ross Pearson. It should be a good one. I expect this one to be a stand-up war. I really don't expect, if I'm going to expect a takedown maybe from Pearson's edge to try to maybe avoid some of the spinning attacks and power of Paul Felder. Other than that, I don't think Paul Felder's, I don't think he will be able to replicate what Evan Dunham did and kind of take him down and hold him there. He's a different style of fighter, but both these two are excellent stand-up fighters, and I think that's what we're going to see come this Saturday on pay-per-view, or I guess in this case, Fox Sports 1.
Yeah, I think 100% Ross is going to try and take him down. I mean, I'm not trying to put Ross say he doesn't have a chance in this fight, but man, Felder, he really shocked me in his last fight. There's not many dudes in the world that are going to stand at striking range with Edson Barboza and put on that type of fight. I mean, anyone that beat I mean, you got to mix it up, take him down, whatever, but he stood in his striking range and he went toe-to-toe for all and made it a great fight. So Felder really impressed me. I don't think Pearson wants to stand in that striking range with him. He's going to have to try and force a takedown, maybe learn something from his last fight. So, yeah, I'm giving a pick. I mean, well, that's not the main card, but I think Felder gets it done. I think he finishes Pearson. Pretty exciting.
And for Pearson, just real quickly, this to me is a fight where his back is against the wall. I mean, his last fight was not good against Dunham, and then going back to last year, he got knocked out by Iaquinta very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of was on a roll there, and I felt the Iaquinta kind of derailed him. I mean, he's not that old in his career, but if he loses to Paul Felder, if I double-check here, I think that's 3 out of his last 4 fights would be a loss. Of course, he had that horrible decision loss to Diego Sanchez. Most thought that he won that fight. Regardless, he's still got a loss. Just kind of looking over it, he did have a win. I forgot he had that huge knockout there of Sam Stout. But going back to 2014, he's only 2-3 in his last fight. And he also had that no contest. That was that illegal knee that he got hit with against the young assassin Melvin Gillard back in October of 2013. So looking at his last 6 fights, only 2 wins. If he loses another one, this time to a young up-and-coming guy like Paul Felder, I wouldn't be surprised, despite being an Ultimate Fighter winner, that he gets cut.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, I really do like him, but if he takes this loss, maybe one more fight, if that, but I don't know.
All right, let's get to the main card, UFC 191 live on pay-per-view this Saturday, September 5th from Las Vegas, Nevada, MGM Grand Garden Arena there in Las Vegas. First fight of the evening will be in the women's strawweight division as Alex Chambers takes on Paige Van Zandt, 12 gauge. And look at this fight. We weren't huge on it because we thought Paige is an overwhelming favorite in this fight. And with good reason. She's 2-0 so far in the UFC. Her last fight, a victory over Felice Herrig, UFC on Fox 15, riding a 3-fight winning streak, and 3 of her 5 career victories are by decision. Looking at Chambers, she's finally able to get her first win in the UFC. Kind of gritted out, getting dominated by Caitlin Kern to come back, get a submission victory at UFC Fight Night 65. And of her 5 victories, 4 are by finish, 2 submissions, and 2 knockouts. really, other than the submission, Billy, I don't see a way that Alex Chambers wins. I just think that looking at, and not only that, just the way Van Zant was able to handle Felice Herrig, who I think is a tricky
Yeah.
submission specialist. I don't think Chambers is going to throw up anything that Felice Herrig couldn't. And she was able to go right at Felice, take her down, and pound her out for 15 minutes. I mean, it was a great game plan. And when it stays standing, I haven't really seen that much from Chambers. I mean, she got dominated by Kylan Curran. So I don't think her stand-up game is that straight. And, of course, we all know Paige Van Zandt already has beat Curran. So unless Chambers has completely dramatically changed her in the last 3 months or kind of gets lucky again with the submission, I think this is all 12 gauge.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't see much she can offer because what I was gonna say is Paige kind of sometimes she's more hustle than technique, where she's just gonna out hard you, out hustle you. That's why she beat Felice so bad. So I was gonna say you might have opportunity to catch her in a submission in some of those, but like you said, if Felice couldn't do it, I'm not gonna bet on Chambers to be able to. So far, Paige has done nothing but impress. She puts a pace on and she doesn't stop hustling it. If you're switching in a transition, she's gonna beat you there every time. So you got to be ready to go, go, go. And I really like Paige in this fight. I don't think Chambers offers too much.
The next fight of the evening will be in the light heavyweight division as former Ultimate Fighter winner Corey Anderson takes on Jan Blachowicz. Looking at Blachowicz, 1-1 in UFC, his last fight was a loss to Jimmy Manuwa at Fight Night 64, and 7 of his 18 career victories are by submission. Looking at Anderson, as I mentioned, the former tough winner, 2-1 in the UFC, lost his first fight in the UFC in his last fight to Jean Vellante at Fox 15, and of his 5 career victories, 3 are by knockout. Now, the interesting thing about that fight against Vellante, you and I were both on hand for that fight in New Jersey, great fight, was the fact that Anderson didn't really try to take out much and went up, stand up against Vellante, where that's kind of been his bread and butter. And even though he got knocked out, what a great fight that was. One fight of the night, and I think showed the evolution of Corey Anderson, if nothing else, that this guy's not just simply a wrestler. He's not just simply taking you down and holding you there. He can stand up. He can throw. He has some power of his own. He just kind of got caught there against Vellante. And looking against Blachowicz, I did not like his fight against Jimmy Manuwa. It's probably one of the worst fights I've seen this year. I think him and probably Jimmy Manuwa will win that. I wasn't very impressed with his first win in the UFC either. You know, he's a bigger guy. He's strong. Maybe he catches Anderson to submission, but I think Anderson technically and not only that, I think he's the better athlete too. I think Blachowicz is going to have his work cut out for him here against Corey Anderson.
Yeah, I was going to say almost just on the athletic side, I think Anderson's really going to have this fight wherever he wants it. He's going to dictate that. So it sort of goes in his favor right there. If he wants to stand and strike, he's going to. If he wants to try and go to the ground, he's going to be able to put Blachowicz there. So I think this fight really decides at him, and I don't see much coming from Blachowicz to be able to catch him into that. He could do it, but I would put most of my siding on Anderson to be able to control this fight for 3 rounds.
And the good thing is, of course, Blachowicz was supposed to take on Rumble Johnson when this card was first announced, but they moved him, found Corey Anderson makes more sense, both fighters coming off a loss, and they gave him the guy that beat Blachowicz at UFC 164 for Rumble Johnson, that being Jimmy Manuwa. Manuwa 15-1 in his career, 4-1 in the UFC. Last fight, as I said, defeated Blachowicz at UFC Fight Night 64. 13 of his 15 career victories are by knockout. That's significant because Rumble Johnson, 19 career victories, also 13 knockouts. Overall in the UFC, 10-5. His last fight, of course, a loss for the light heavyweight title to Daniel Cormier at UFC 187. And this fight's going to be, I expect it probably only last 1 round. I think these guys just throw too hard and too fast to it go longer than 5 minutes. Somebody's getting hit with the bomb and they're going to sleep. I don't know how it goes 15. I really don't. And for Rumble Johnson, what I would like to see is not so much him getting a first-round knockout or getting a victory, is being able to keep himself composed. And I think that's kind of what happened in the Cormier fight. He saw blood. He went kind of in quickly against a guy that even after the fight admitted he thought could take his shots, rush things, gas himself out, ends up losing the fight. Now, Manuwa's not quite Daniel Cormier, but that's something I want to look for, is if we can see a more composed Rumble Johnson, more like when he fought Phil Davis. more so that Rumble Johnson than the guy we saw fight Daniel Cormier. If he can do that, I wouldn't be opposed to Johnson getting another crack at the title for his next fight, either against the winner of Gustafsson or Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, I think what happened there for Johnson is he kind of just got trigger happy when you get those two huge knockouts so easy. I mean, he came in there, beat Phil Davis, went three, so that puts his confidence in his conditioning, and then absolutely destroys Lil Nog in like 10 seconds. I remember. There was another big knockout in between there,
Yeah,
wasn't there?
Gustafsson was the last
Oh
one.
yeah, and Gustafsson really fast. So at that point, he's just thinking, I'm finishing anyone this quick, and he kind of burned out against Cormier. Against Manuel, I think he'll be a little more reserved like the Davis fight, but I don't know how much Manuel offers, and I don't know if he's like the one fight he's had that was huge against Gustafsson. He kind of got destroyed there, so I don't know how much he can hang with these top level league guys like Johnson or Gustafsson. So he has a lot more to prove, and I think Johnson will come on more reserved, play it smart, and land that big shot.
Especially like we said, how bad his last fight was,
Yeah,
despite getting the win.
exactly. So I don't. I'm not giving him the most looking in. He could pull it off, and it shocked me. But if you're looking at this fight, you got to be thinking, what can I do to do something different to stop Johnson? I mean, he's got to go back to the drawing board and change something up.
Co-main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, as two former champions will meet. And as they've been building up for this fight, they were supposed to meet about 10 years ago. But then Frank Mir, of course, as we all know, had that tragic motorcycle accident and had to be stripped of his UFC title. Arlovski ended up fighting for the vacant title, won it, defended a couple times, of course, had those great battles back and forth with the heavyweight title with Tim Sylvia, and that big rivalry really early on in the very early Zuffa days of the UFC. But Arlovski, as well as Frank Mir, have kind of made a comeback as of late, as Frank Mir has won his last two fights, both by first-round knockout, most recently knocking out Todd Duffy at UFC Fight Night 71. Overall in the UFC, 16-9, and of his 18 overall career victories, half of them, 9, are by submission. Looking at Arlovski, overall in the UFC, 13-4, 4-0 since coming back. Overall, 6-fight winning streak. His last fight knocking out Travis Brown there at UFC 187. Now his career 24 victories. He has 17 by knockout. And correct myself, 5-fight winning streak overall, 4-0 in the UFC. So this is a fight here where, once again, if it goes to the ground, Frank Mir, obviously, once again, as most fights he has, a tremendous advantage to the ground. Arlovski's always been a tough guy to take down. In fact, I don't know what his takedown defense rate is, but it's got to be pretty high. I don't recall too many fights where you see AA on his back. So I think Frank Mir is going to have trouble there. Standing up, Frank Mir obviously proved that he still has some power left. But the boxing of Andrei Arlovski has always kind of been what separated him from other heavyweights. Not just his power, but his technique, his footwork, his head movement. That was a full-on display against Travis Brown. And I don't know, Frank Mir at this stage of his career, like I said, has the power, but he doesn't have that bounce in his step anymore. He doesn't have that, footwork. And I'm not sure, other than maybe a puncher's chance and obviously, maybe a scramble catching the submission, just pure standing up, he's going to have a tough time dealing with the Belarusian Andrei Arlovski.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I am most excited for this fight. I mean, not as much this fight because I'm a little upset it even happened. I wanted Arlovski to get the title fight, obviously, but this whole Arlovski run has been so amazing to me, and I can't get enough of it. And I think with Mir, I don't want to say he got lucky, but I think Duffy kind of overlooked him, went out there, bit down, and swung with him. Mir landed the good counter there and put him to sleep. But when it comes to Andrei Arlovski, he's going to be a lot more composed. I don't think he's going to overlook and just rush Mir. And I think Mir's been falling in this thing where he's been loving his boxing. Just sit there, box against Bigfoot, box against Duffy. And like you said, that's where Arlovski shines. I mean, the combinations he puts together. He hit Travis Brown with those little back fists, like the tattoo shots, which I love. And I don't think he's going to want to do that with Arlovski. I think Frank Mir needs to come out and shoot a takedown immediately or do something different because Arlovski just has this momentum behind him. And his boxing has looked amazing. His power's still there. When you knock out the number 3 guy in the world, Travis Brown, I mean, it's been looking really good for Arlovski.
Especially when you consider also throwing how impressive that knockout was.
Oh.
Disregarding his loss to Bigfoot Silva, of course, which he pulled his hamstring, he had that 5-round fight against Verdum. Verdum couldn't finish him. Arlovski was able to do that. I think that's a pretty big deal. The first man to actually put away Travis Brown.
Yeah,
I think is a big deal.
100%.
You know, considering when Overeem had him rocked, a couple other people had him rocked, weren't able to beat him. So I think that's a really big deal. He finished Travis Brown. So getting to the main event, though, completely different. We go from some really
Yeah.
big guys to the smallest
Oddly
guys.
enough, too, Arlovsky and Dotson are like really good friends. I didn't know
Yeah,
that,
they
but
trained
yeah.
together at Jackson. So boy, they're probably not training at the same time though. A little awkward as Arlovsky's like three John Dodsons. But looking at the main event for the second time, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson will put his title on the line once again against John Dodson for the UFC Flyweight Championship. Looking at Dodson, he is 6-1 in the UFC. Of course, his only loss in the UFC is to the guy he's facing here, Mighty Mouse Johnson. 3-fight winning streak overall. His last fight, he defeated Zach Makowski at UFC 187, and of his 17 career victories, 8 are by knockout. Looking at Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, these are, I think, already Hall of Fame numbers here from the man fighting out of Washington here. 10-1-1 in the UFC, 8-fight winning streak, and he is going now, I believe, for his 7th straight title defense, which is getting in rarefied air. If you get more than 5, you're pretty good. He's going for 7. Of course, Anderson Silva has the most. I think he's tied with GSP overall with 10. I think GSP got 10. Hughes had 7, I think. Liddell had 4 or 5. I think Ortiz had 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think
Jones had 8 or 9. Could continue. So he's getting up there in most overall title defenses. And in fact, if you saw an article, I believe it was on Junkie. I don't know if it was reposted anywhere else first. That's his goal, is to have the most title defenses and break Anderson Silva's record, and he's fast approaching that. And bringing up his stats, last fight he defended against Horiguchi, UFC 186, as we're gushing over Mighty Mouse here. 9 of his 22 career victories are by submission. First fight, Dodson, yes, did have some success. Caught Mighty Mouse a couple times. I think Mighty Mouse was a little surprised at the speed. I think it's the first time he's fought someone that could actually match him punch for punch. And that surprised him. But overall, Mighty Mouse was able to vastly use his great conditioning. I think that was part of it. And 2, his obviously tremendous grappling to eventually get a submission victory over John Dodson. And I believe that was in the 3rd round of their fight, which was a UFC on Fox fight about 2 years ago. And the thing about Mighty Mouse is when he's had a rematch against people, he's performed even better the second time around. First time against Benavidez was a close split decision 5-round fight. Next time, knocks him out in the 1st round. Ian McCall, I know that fight was a draw. You can make a case he lost that fight. However, they do that. Even if it goes to that 4th sudden victory round, however you want to call that draw or loss, comes back, completely dominates.
Yeah.
Now, even though this is a rematch that was a win over him, it was a fight, like I said, where Dodson had a lot of success. But I think that looking at this fight, and I got it wrong, he actually decision. I thought it was one of those fights he had a late knockout victory. So my apologies to Dodson on that. He did go all 5 rounds, but it was his conditioning that did lead him to that victory. And the second time around, I just don't see Mighty Mouse even giving Dodson a chance to unload that. I'm not saying Dodson can't land it, but him and Matt Hume just come up with a great game plan. And I know Greg Jackson's also a wizard as well, but just the way Hume and Mighty Mouse go together, I don't know if I've ever seen quite a coach combination like that. Maybe back in the heyday with Miletich and Matt Hughes. That's about the only thing I can really kind of boil it down to. And it's just like, it's almost, I hate to use pro wrestling, but it's almost like he orchestrates the whole fight. It's like he writes down the script of how the fight's going to go, how he's going to enter, how he's going to exit, how's he going to circle, how's he going to take down, how's this punch going to go. It's like he has like a sheet like this of notes that he like takes into the cage with him, and he checks them all off. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone do that before, and that's what Dodson has to go up against.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel sorry for him. He has to go up against this guy.
Yeah, I mean, for Dodson, here's the thing. I'm just going to start here. If Demetrius Johnson beats Dodson this time, which I think this is the biggest fight he has left for him in this division, I think he goes on to break Anderson Silva's record. But giving away my pick here, I think Dodson's going to be able to make the adjustments to win this time. The hardest thing with Demetrius Johnson, I feel, is condition. I mean, this dude puts that pace, and round 1 and 5, he's going to look the same either way, and he's going to be able. I mean, when you throw that armbar explosive finish like that in the last 10 seconds of the fight, I mean, you got to be able to go 100%. And I think Dotson kind of he still has great conditioning. I mean, he can go all day, but when you're throwing shots that hard and that fierce, you're going to gas a little bit. And if you slow down even the slightest, even if it's not that noticeable, Johnson's going to get that edge on you. But I think Dotson will be able to find those big punches, keep himself composed, and be able to work out a good win here. But man, this fight is these. I don't know why these fights aren't bigger than they are, because these are some of the probably the smallest pay-per-views, honestly. I don't know if there's anyone that's going to go less than a Demetrius Johnson one, but every fight I watch with him is so exciting. I mean, I can't say enough about the dude. He's probably the best pound for pound.
Right, and whether people say he's boring or not, I think that sometimes, there are stretches of his fights that are boring, but if you actually look at the technical sounds, how he finishes, most of his fight, really to me, the only fight I thought was kind of boring, to be quite honest, was probably the Bagatinov fight.
Yeah.
That's because Bagatinov tried to take him down, was holding him against the cage, but just was getting meat that. Yeah. And to me, that was the most boring fight. But if you look at his other ones, I mean, he had a great fight against Ian McCall the first and second time. I thought the first Benavidez fight was great. The second one, I mean, he knocked him out in 2 minutes. Yeah. So you can't say that was boring. He had, I thought his fight against Moraga was good. Obviously, the first time against Dodson. The Kyrgios one, I mean, he just dominated him quickly. In the Horiguchi one, he just took Horiguchi out of his game.
And I will say, too, he has an iron chin, because, I mean, he's got hit with some stuff.
I mean, Horiguchi's hit him with really good shots. Dodson's hit him with good shots. Benavidez is a hard hitter.
Horiguchi landed a huge knee. It was early on, like the second or third, and it just didn't even phase him. The only time we've ever really seen him sort of drop was Dodson, and that's the only person I can think. But, I mean, man, he puts on exciting fights. I don't care what people say. I think if you think his fights are boring, you're not watching the right sport.
Well, let's get to the picks here for UFC 191, starting first with the first fight on the main card in the strawweight division, Alex Chambers against 12-gauge Cage Van Zandt. I think this is all PBZ in this one.
Yeah, I don't know what Chambers can offer. I got to go Paige Van Zandt here, and then hopefully a few more fights, and she'll feel she's ready.
Light heavyweight division, Jan Blachowicz is taking on Corey Anderson. Like I said, I haven't been too impressed with Jan Blachowicz so far in his UFC tenure. So give me the guy beastin', 25-8, Corey Anderson.
Yeah, Corey Anderson, I mean, we all know how I like my nicknames, but that's one of the best, and he's going to be able to control that fight and make it wherever he wants.
Also in the light heavyweight division, Jimmy Manuel against Anthony Rumble Johnson. I like Jimmy Manuel, but it's Rumble Johnson.
Yeah, like I was saying, when I've seen Jimmy Manuel go up against these elite guys, Gustafsson didn't look too good. I think he's not going to have enough to be able to stop Rumble Johnson.
Co-main event of the evening, heavyweight division, a battle of former UFC heavyweight champions as the Pitbull Andrei Arlovski takes on Frank Mir, as I believe it's pronounced, at least if you ask Brock Lesnar. I think it's closer than I probably think and a lot of people think, but I'm going with Andrei Arlovski in this one.
Yeah, I think everything says the Pitbull. If Mir just sticks to his boxing, it's going to be hard to beat Arlovski, but Arlovski can be caught. So we know that, and Mir definitely still has power, so it's going to be an exciting fight, but Arlovski gets the edge.
Main event of the evening, UFC flyweight title, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson against the Magician, John Dodson, for the second time. I think until proven, like I said, we've talked about Anderson Silva and the title thing. He's on a similar level. Well, until someone can prove they can touch this guy, just pick him. And that's what I'm going with here. And that's Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson to maintain the title once again.
As much as I want to feel that way, and I should, I like Dodson here, man. I think Dodson makes the adjustments. He lands those big shots, and I think he plays a lot smarter and maybe even gets a finish. Say that bold. Dodson gets a finish here.
All right, well, we shall see. We'll find out Saturday on the pay-per-view for UFC 191. Before we end the show, any final thoughts, Billy?
I'm good, man. If Arlovski wins, give him a title shot. Don't mess around with no Fedor stuff. I don't want to see that. Give him a title shot.
All right, he is Billy Brandt, a.k.a. Big Shot Bill. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. thank everybody for listening. Thank our partners at MMA Signatures, USA.com, MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca. Thanks to all and everybody that also support us, and thank you for our continued support, liking our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast, and of course subscribing and watching right here live on YouTube, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. So for Billy Brandt, I'm your host, Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.